Picture this: a man with unmatched strength, born with a purpose that few could even imagine. From birth, he was destined to deliver his people from their enemies. But this strength came with a price, a vow that set him apart, marking him as sacred. He was bound by a commitment so unique that even the cutting of his hair could mean his downfall. In every fight, he seemed invincible. Roaring like a lion, he could take down entire armies with nothing but the jawbone of a donkey. He wasn't just strong, he was a living legend, feared by his enemies and respected by his own people. But beneath this powerful exterior, he struggled with weaknesses that would ultimately lead him to face the betrayal of those closest to him. Sounds like a superhero origin story, right? But this isn't a fictional tale. This is the story of Samson, a man whose strengths and weaknesses reveal truths that resonate with us even today. Get ready to embark on the epic journey of Samson, a story brimming with awe-inspiring strength, bold choices, and a powerful legacy that still speaks to us today. Join us as we dig into the deeper meaning of his battles, the impact of his choices, and his ultimate sacrifice. Discover the lessons his life holds and how they might touch your own journey. Make sure to hit subscribe so you're here for every thrilling moment, and share widely with those who'd love to dive into this timeless tale. We're eager to hear from you. Drop your thoughts and reflections in the comments below. After Gideon's death, the Israelites once again fell into their familiar cycle. They sinned, faced suffering, repented, and started over, again and again. This cycle grieved God's heart, as we see in Judges 10:16, which says, "And they put away their strange gods from among them and served the Lord, and his soul was grieved for the misery of Israel." This verse reveals a powerful truth. God couldn't bear to see his people suffer. Despite their repeated mistakes, each time they sincerely turned back to him, he responded with mercy, sending a deliverer to rescue them. But the Israelites' loyalty was short-lived. They continued to stray from God, rebelling against him time after time. Eventually, God allowed the Philistines, their enemies, to conquer them and rule over them as a consequence of their choices. For 40 years, the Philistines oppressed Israel. Then, in his compassion, God chose to send a new savior, a man named Samson, who would be the instrument of deliverance for his people once more. In the land of Israel, there lived a man named Manoah, whose wife had long suffered from infertility. The sorrow and disappointment weighed heavily on their marriage, bringing tension and heartache between them. But one day, something remarkable happened. An angel of the Lord appeared to Manoah's wife with a message of hope that would change their lives forever. The angel told her that, despite her barrenness, she would soon conceive and bear a son, a child destined to save Israel from the oppression of the Philistines. This child would be no ordinary boy. He was to be a Nazirite, someone uniquely set apart to serve the Lord with his entire life. As a sign of his dedication, he was to follow specific vows. He was never to drink wine or anything from the grapevine, his hair was never to be cut, and he was to avoid any contact with dead bodies or graves. These restrictions were sacred symbols of his calling, showing that this child was meant to live differently from others, fully devoted to God's purposes. In time, Manoah's wife gave birth to a son, and they named him Samson. From his earliest days, it was clear that God's hand was upon him. As he grew up, the Lord blessed him abundantly, marking his life with a sense of purpose and strength. Even while Samson was still young in the region of Mahane-Dan between Zorah and Eshtaol, he began to feel the stirring of God's Spirit within him. It was as if God himself was preparing him, shaping him for the great mission that lay ahead. Every blessing, every moment of favor, reminded his family that Samson's life was set apart for something extraordinary. One day, Samson traveled to Timnah with his parents, seeking a wife from among the Philistines. Along the way, as they neared the vineyards of Timnah, Samson separated from his parents and wandered off on his own. In an instant, a young lion appeared, charging toward him with a ferocious roar. The danger was real and sudden, a vivid reminder of life's unpredictability. Yet in that critical moment the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson with great power, filling him with strength beyond human ability. Without a single weapon in his hand, Samson tore the lion apart as if it were nothing. This act was not just a show of strength, but a clear sign of the divine favor upon him. Remarkably, he chose not to tell his parents, possibly out of humility, or perhaps because the encounter was a deeply personal experience with God's presence and power, one he felt was meant just for him. Later, when Samson returned to the place where he had killed the lion, he discovered that bees had made a hive inside the lion's carcass, producing honey. He took some of the honey and ate it, and then shared it with his parents without revealing where it came from. This seemingly simple act became the basis for a riddle Samson would later pose to the Philistines at his wedding feast. The riddle was born from his powerful encounter with the lion and the unexpected sweetness that followed, an encounter that symbolized both the danger he faced and the divine provision he received. It was a clever challenge to the Philistines, drawing on his experience of strength, survival, and the mysterious ways in which God worked in his life. Samson's conflict with the Philistines deepened after his marriage to a woman from Timnah, a marriage that ultimately ended in betrayal. When his wife was given to another man, Samson felt deeply wronged and in his anger sought revenge on the Philistines. In a dramatic display of retribution, he captured 300 foxes, or possibly jackals, which were more common in that region, and tied their tails together in pairs. Between each pair, he fastened a torch and then set them loose into the Philistine fields. As the terrified animals ran, the fire spread quickly, consuming the grain fields, vineyards, and olive groves, leaving the Philistines' crops in ruins. The Philistines, enraged by Samson's actions, sought revenge and camped in Judah, which caused great alarm among the people. The men of Judah, confused and fearful, asked why the Philistines had come, and the Philistines responded that they were there to capture Samson. To avoid further conflict, 3,000 men from Judah went to the cave in the rock of Etam, where Samson had taken refuge. When they found him, they scolded him for causing trouble and sought to avoid a direct confrontation with the Philistines. In a decision born from fear and a desire to pacify the Philistines, they agreed to bind Samson and hand him over to the enemy, as long as they were not the ones who would kill him. Samson, understanding their intentions, allowed them to tie him with new ropes. With Samson in their custody, they led him to Lehi, where, upon seeing him, the Philistines let out a victorious shout, believing they had finally captured their enemy. As the Philistines closed in on Samson, the Spirit of the Lord suddenly came upon him with overwhelming power. The ropes that bound his arms, which had been securely tied, became like burnt threads, and they fell away from his hands, leaving him free. In that moment of divine strength, Samson scanned his surroundings and discovered a fresh jawbone of a donkey. With this unlikely weapon in hand, he struck down 1,000 Philistine soldiers in a single, fierce battle. This remarkable act not only showcased his incredible physical strength, but also his ability to improvise and use whatever was at his disposal. After the battle, filled with a sense of triumph, Samson looked at the jawbone in his hand and, in a boastful yet triumphant declaration, said, "With a donkey's jawbone I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone I have killed 1,000 men." He then named the place of his victory Ramath Lehi, meaning Jawbone Hill, as a lasting reminder of the incredible triumph he had achieved through God's strength and his own resourcefulness. Samson was very thirsty and cried out to the Lord. God provided water from a hollow place in Lehi, reviving him. Samson named the place En-Hakkore, meaning Caller's Spring. Samson later traveled to Gaza, where he encountered a prostitute and spent the night with her. When the Gazites discovered that he was in their city, they saw this as their chance to capture him. They surrounded the house and waited at the city gate, planning to seize him at dawn. Confident that they had trapped him, they remained silent, thinking they had him cornered. However, at midnight, Samson arose from his rest, walked to the city gate, and performed an astonishing act of strength. With divine power, He tore the gates off their hinges, including the posts and the bar, and lifted the entire structure. Then, carrying the massive gates on his shoulders, he made his way to the top of a hill that faced Hebron. Sometime later, Samson fell in love with Delilah, a woman from the valley of Sorek. However, this relationship went against God's command. Samson had been warned not to marry a Philistine, as the Philistines were enemies of Israel. Despite this warning, Samson's love for Delilah led him to disregard God's guidance. Seeing an opportunity to capture Samson and put an end to his threat, the rulers of the Philistines approached Delilah. They offered her a bribe of 100 pieces of silver each, a substantial sum, if she could uncover the secret of Samson's incredible strength. Their goal was to learn what made him so powerful so they could capture and neutralize him, ending his threat to their dominance. At first, Delilah asked Samson directly to reveal the secret of his strength, but Samson cleverly misled her multiple times. He told her that if he were bound with 7 fresh bowstrings, he would become weak. So Delilah tried it, but when the Philistines ambushed him, Samson effortlessly broke free, leaving her disappointed. Undeterred, Delilah pressed him again. This time, Samson claimed that binding him with new ropes would rob him of his strength. Delilah once again tried it, but once more, Samson broke free with ease. Finally, Samson told Delilah that if the 7 braids of his hair were woven into fabric on a loom, he would lose his strength. Delilah, believing she was close to the truth, tried this method as well. But when the Philistines arrived, Samson awoke, realizing what had happened, and tore the loom apart. Each time, Samson's strength remained intact, demonstrating his cleverness and his unwillingness to reveal the true source of his power. Frustrated but relentless, Delilah continued to nag Samson day after day, wearing him down until he was exhausted to the point of near despair. Finally, Samson, unable to bear her constant questioning, revealed the truth to her. His incredible strength came from his Nazirite vow to God, which included never cutting his hair. Delilah, now armed with this secret, informed the Philistine rulers. While Samson slept on her lap, she called for someone to shave off his 7 braids, symbolizing the breaking of his vow. The moment his hair was cut, the Lord's presence left him, and he was left completely vulnerable. The Philistines, who had been waiting for this opportunity, captured Samson. They gouged out his eyes, blinding him, and took him to Gaza. There, they bound him with bronze shackles and forced him to grind grain in a prison, a degrading and humiliating task meant to break his spirit. Samson, once a mighty warrior, now found himself reduced to the most shameful of positions, all because he had allowed his strength to be exposed. The Philistine rulers gathered in the temple of their god, Dagon, to celebrate their triumph over Samson, giving praise to their god for handing him over to them. They called for Samson to be brought out, hoping to mock him and make him entertain them in their moment of victory. Samson, led into the temple by a young servant, knew this was his moment. He asked to be placed between the 2 main support pillars of the temple, where he could steady himself. Though his physical strength seemed gone, Samson's strength had miraculously returned, and he knew this was the moment to act. With his hands pressed against the pillars, Samson lifted his heart to God in a final prayer, asking for the strength to avenge the loss of his eyes. Then, with all the strength God granted him, Samson pushed against the pillars. The temple shook and collapsed, killing everyone inside, including all the Philistine rulers. In that final act of strength, Samson killed more Philistines than he had in his entire life, fulfilling his destiny as a judge and deliverer of Israel. His death marked the ultimate victory over their oppressors, restoring some measure of justice and freedom to Israel. From the narration, we learn that, even when it seemed like he had fallen completely, blinded, captured, and humiliated, God's grace was still with him. Despite the mockery of his enemies, Samson's strength was renewed, and in his final act, he defeated more Philistines than ever before. This teaches us that even when we feel defeated or mocked by others, God's strength can still rise in us. Just as Samson's hair grew back, so can our hope and strength be renewed when we turn back to God. Our enemies may celebrate our fall, but God's power is greater, and we can overcome through His grace. In life, we will face temptations and challenges, but we must remember that God's grace and strength are always available to those who remain faithful to Him. Our failures do not define us. God's ability to restore and empower us for victory does. So, let us stay strong, trust in God's plan, and never give up, for the battle is not over until God says it is. If you find the narration insightful and inspiring, don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe to our channel for more powerful stories and lessons. Share this video with your friends and family to spread the message of faith, strength, and resilience. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave your comments below and let us know how this story of Samson resonates with you. Remember, no matter the trials, God's strength is always with us. Stay tuned for more, and thanks for watching.